I never thought I'd end up falling for the man who was supposed to be investigating me, but life has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. My name is Adrian, and 6 months ago I was a person of interest in a corporate fraud case I had nothing to do with. The detective assigned to my case was Nathan Cross, and from the moment he walked into the interrogation room with those steel-gray eyes and that carefully neutral expression, something shifted in the air between us. I didn't know it then, but that first meeting would change both of our lives forever. It started on a Tuesday morning when 2 plainclothes officers showed up at my apartment. I was still in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, completely blindsided. They explained that my former employer was under investigation for embezzlement and that my name had come up in connection with some suspicious transactions. I felt my stomach drop. I'd left that company 3 months earlier, specifically because I'd noticed some irregularities in the books and didn't want to be associated with whatever was happening there. Now, apparently, my attempt to distance myself had made me look guilty. They asked me to come down to the station to answer some questions. It wasn't an arrest, they assured me. Just a conversation. I got dressed in a daze, my hands shaking as I buttoned my shirt. I called my sister from the car, and she immediately said she'd find me a lawyer, but I insisted I didn't need one because I hadn't done anything wrong. Looking back, I was naive. But I was also terrified, and just wanted to clear my name as quickly as possible. The police station was exactly like you see in movies. All fluorescent lighting and beige walls and the smell of burnt coffee. They put me in a small room with a metal table and 3 chairs. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, my knee bouncing nervously, running through everything I could remember about those last few weeks at my old job. Then the door opened, and Nathan walked in. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that was just slightly too long to be regulation and a strong jawline that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and a shoulder holster that made everything suddenly feel very real. But it was his eyes that caught me. Gray like storm clouds, sharp and observant, the kind of eyes that seemed to see right through whatever mask you were wearing. He carried a thick manila folder and a legal pad, and when he sat down across from me, I caught the faint scent of his cologne, something woody and clean. "Adrian Castellano?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I'm Detective Nathan Cross. I'm going to ask you some questions about your time at Meridian Financial Group. You're not under arrest, and you're free to leave at any time, but I hope you'll cooperate with our investigation. Do you understand?" I said yes, and then we began. For the next 2 hours, Nathan walked me through my entire employment history at Meridian. What were my responsibilities? Who did I report to? Did I have access to the accounts in question? Had I noticed anything unusual? I answered everything honestly, explaining that I'd been a junior analyst and had stumbled across some discrepancies in the quarterly reports. I told him I'd brought my concerns to my supervisor, Marcus Chen, and that Marcus had brushed them off, telling me I was misreading the data. 2 weeks later, I'd been let go, supposedly due to budget cuts. Nathan took notes the entire time, his pen moving steadily across the page. He rarely looked up at me, and when he did, his expression gave nothing away. But I found myself studying him during the pauses, noticing the way his brow furrowed slightly when he was thinking, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his fingers gripped the pen. There was something magnetic about him, an intensity that made it hard to look away. "Why didn't you report what you found to the authorities?" he asked at one point, and I heard the faint edge of suspicion in his voice. I explained that I was 24 years old, fresh out of grad school, and terrified of losing my first real job. I'd convinced myself that maybe I was wrong, that Marcus knew better than I did. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly, and he made another note. "That was foolish," he said quietly, and I felt shame burn in my chest even though I knew he was right. When the interview finally ended, Nathan stood and handed me his card. "If you think of anything else, call me directly," he said. His fingers brushed mine as I took the card, and I felt an electric jolt run up my arm. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I saw something flicker in his expression, something that looked almost like surprise. Then he stepped back, professional mask firmly in place. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Castellano. We'll be in touch." I left the station feeling drained and anxious. I kept Nathan's card in my wallet, running my thumb over the embossed letters of his name. Over the next week, I found myself thinking about him at odd moments. The way he'd leaned forward when I was explaining the financial discrepancies, genuinely interested in what I was saying. The rough timbre of his voice, the way he'd looked at me, really looked at me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. I told myself it was just stress, that my brain was latching on to him because he represented control in a situation where I felt powerless. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. 2 weeks later, Nathan called me. They'd arrested Marcus Chen and 2 other executives, but they needed more information about the specific reports I'd flagged. Could I come look at some documents? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment, somewhere neutral and public. I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing what to wear, finally settling on dark jeans and a fitted navy sweater. When I arrived, Nathan was already there, sitting at a corner table with his laptop open and 2 cups of coffee in front of him. "I took a guess on your order," he said as I sat down. "Black with 1 sugar." He'd remembered from the interrogation room when they'd brought me coffee. That small detail, that he'd paid attention and remembered, made my heart skip. "Thank you," I managed, and he gave me a slight smile, the first real smile I'd seen from him. It transformed his entire face, softening those sharp edges and making him look younger, more approachable. We spent the next hour going through financial documents on his laptop. I pointed out the irregularities I'd noticed, explaining how the numbers didn't add up, how someone had clearly been moving money between accounts to hide the theft. Nathan listened intently, asking smart questions that showed he understood the complexity of what I was describing. At one point, he leaned closer to see something on the screen and his shoulder pressed against mine. The contact sent warmth flooding through my body, and I had to force myself to focus on the spreadsheet in front of us. "You have a good eye for this," Nathan said when we finished. "You should have been in forensic accounting, not stuck as a junior analyst." I laughed, feeling pleased by the compliment. "Maybe in my next life," I said. We talked for a while longer, the conversation drifting away from the case to more personal topics. I learned that Nathan had been a detective for 6 years, that he'd grown up in Boston, that he ran marathons in his spare time. He asked about my master's degree, my family, what I was doing for work now. The cafe started to empty around us as afternoon turned to evening, and I realized we'd been talking for almost 3 hours. Nathan seemed to realize it at the same time. He glanced at his watch, and something like regret crossed his face. "I should let you go," he said, closing his laptop. "Thank you for your help today. This is going to be crucial for the case." We stood, and there was an awkward moment where neither of us seemed to want to leave. "If you need anything else," I started to say, and he nodded quickly. "I'll call you," he said. Then he hesitated and added, "Adrian, I want you to know that I believe you. I don't think you had anything to do with this. I'm going to make sure that's clear in my report." The relief that washed over me was profound. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means everything." Over the next month, Nathan called me several more times with questions about the case. Each time we ended up talking longer than necessary, the conversations veering into personal territory. I learned that he was 32, that he'd been engaged once but it hadn't worked out, that he loved old noir films and cooked elaborate meals when he was stressed. He learned that I was an only child despite mentioning a sister earlier. I'd been nervous and misspoke, that I played piano, that I'd come out to my parents when I was 19 and they'd been wonderfully supportive. We never explicitly discussed our sexualities, but there was an understanding growing between us, an acknowledgement in the things we didn't say. The tension was becoming unbearable. Every phone call left me restless and distracted. I'd find myself staring at my phone, willing it to ring. When I saw his name on my screen, my pulse would race, and I'd have to take a breath before answering. I knew this was dangerous territory. He was a detective. I was technically still part of his investigation, and getting involved would be complicated at best, career-ending for him at worst. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he laughed, a deep rumbling sound that seemed surprised out of him, the intensity of his focus when he was working through a problem, the gentleness in his voice when he asked how I was holding up. Then one night he called me at almost 10 o'clock. "Adrian," he said, and I could hear something strained in his voice. "I shouldn't be calling you this late. I'm sorry. He trailed off, and I sat up straighter on my couch, concerned. "Nathan, what's wrong?" I asked. There was a long pause. "We closed the case today," he finally said. "Marcus and the others are going to trial. Your name has been completely cleared. I filed my final report this afternoon." I felt relief flood through me, but also something else, something that felt like loss. "That's great news," I said carefully. "So we won't need to talk anymore." "No," he said quietly. "We won't. Not professionally." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Adrian, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything, okay?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it through the phone. "Okay," I whispered. "From the moment I walked into that interrogation room, I knew you were innocent," Nathan said. "I've been doing this job long enough that I can usually tell within the first 5 minutes. But I kept calling you, kept finding excuses to meet with you because I couldn't stop thinking about you. The way you explain things, how your whole face lights up when you're talking about something you're passionate about. That thing you do where you run your hand through your hair when you're nervous. I know this is completely inappropriate and probably breaking a dozen rules. And if you want me to never contact you again, I'll understand. But the case is closed now, and you're not a witness anymore. And I just had to tell you that I haven't been able to get you out of my head for 2 months." I couldn't breathe. The world had narrowed down to Nathan's voice in my ear and the wild hammering of my heart. "Say something," he said, and I could hear the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection. "I thought I was going crazy," I said, my voice shaking. "I thought I was imagining things, that it was just wishful thinking. Nathan, I've been falling for you since that day in the coffee shop. Maybe even before that. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make things complicated for you, but God, I've wanted to." I heard him exhale, a sound of relief and something else. "Can I see you?" he asked. "Tonight. I know it's late, but I don't think I can wait until tomorrow." I laughed, giddy and breathless. "Yes," I said. "Yes, come over." He arrived 40 minutes later, and I'd spent the entire time pacing my apartment, straightening things that didn't need straightening, checking my reflection in every mirror. When I opened the door, he was standing there in jeans and a grey Henley that matched his eyes, his hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Hi," he said softly, and then I was pulling him inside and his arms were around me and we were kissing. It was desperate and tentative all at once, weeks of tension finally breaking. His hands cupped my face and I gripped his shoulders, and when we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for so long," Nathan murmured against my lips. "You have no idea how hard it was to stay professional around you." I laughed and kissed him again, softer this time. "I think I have some idea," I said. We moved to the couch and spent the next several hours just talking and kissing and learning each other. Nathan told me about the stress of the investigation, how he'd had to be so careful to keep his feelings separate from his work, how he'd gone home every night and thought about me. I told him about the agony of waiting for his calls, how I'd analyzed every word he said, looking for signs that he felt the same way. He traced the line of my jaw with his fingers, and I leaned into his touch, feeling safe and wanted in a way I'd never experienced before. I need you to know that this isn't just physical for me, Nathan said at one point, his gray eyes serious. I don't do casual. If we're doing this, I want to really do this. I want to take you to dinner and meet your family and figure out how to make this work around my crazy schedule. I'm all in, Adrian. I felt tears prick my eyes because it was everything I'd been afraid to hope for. I'm all in too, I told him, and watched his face break into that rare, beautiful smile. That was 6 months ago. It hasn't always been easy. Nathan's job is demanding, and there are nights when he comes home exhausted and troubled by things he can't talk about. There was some awkwardness at the precinct when people found out we were together. Questions about the ethics of it all. But Nathan's captain reviewed everything and confirmed that there was no misconduct. Nathan had kept his investigation completely professional and had waited until I was officially cleared before acting on his feelings. Still, there was gossip, and I know it bothered Nathan more than he let on. But we've figured it out together. I've learned to read his moods, to know when he needs space to decompress and when he needs me to hold him. He's learned that I need words of affirmation, that I overthink everything, that I show love through acts of service and cooking elaborate meals. We've built something real and solid, a relationship based on honesty and trust and the kind of deep understanding that comes from really seeing each other. Last week, Nathan asked me to move in with him. We were having dinner at his place, and he'd made this incredible pasta dish from scratch, and he just looked at me across the table and said, I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want this to be our place, not just mine. I said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. We're looking at apartments now, trying to find something that feels like both of us, and it's terrifying and exciting and perfect. Sometimes I think about that first day in the interrogation room, how scared I was, how I never could have imagined that the serious detective with the storm cloud eyes would become the person I love most in the world. Life really does have a twisted sense of humor. I was so worried about being investigated, about clearing my name and moving on with my life. I never expected that the investigation would lead me to the person I'd been looking for all along. Nathan tells me sometimes that he knew from the beginning, that there was something about me that caught him from that first moment. I'm not sure I believe in love at first sight, but I believe in recognition. I believe that sometimes you meet someone and something in you just knows, even if your brain hasn't caught up yet. That's what it was like with Nathan. From that first meeting, some part of me recognized him as someone important, someone who would change my life. We still laugh about how we met, about the absurdity of falling for the detective who was investigating you. Nathan jokes that it's the most complicated meet-cute in history, but I think maybe it's perfect in its own strange way. We started with honesty, with me having to be completely truthful and vulnerable, with him having to see all of me, even the parts I wasn't proud of. There was no pretense, no first date performance. We built our foundation on truth and trust, and that's made everything that came after feel solid and real. I'm sitting in what will soon be our apartment, boxes stacked around me, and Nathan is in the kitchen trying to figure out where we should put the dishes. He's wearing old jeans and a t-shirt, and his hair is sticking up in about 5 different directions, and he's never looked more beautiful to me. He catches me staring and grins. "What?" he asks, walking over. I pull him down next to me and kiss him softly. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," I tell him. He wraps his arm around my shoulders, and I lean into him, feeling completely at home. "I'm the lucky one," Nathan says quietly. I could have just closed that case and moved on, but something made me pay attention, made me see you. I don't know if it was instinct or fate or just dumb luck, but I'm grateful for it every single day. We sit there in the quiet afternoon light, surrounded by the pieces of our separate lives that we're now combining into something new. It feels like a beginning, like we're standing at the edge of something vast and wonderful. I never thought I'd end up here, falling in love with the man who investigated me. But Nathan taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes You have to go through the fear and uncertainty to get to the joy on the other side. And sometimes the person who's supposed to be looking at you with suspicion ends up looking at you with love instead. We've built something beautiful from the strangest beginning, and I can't wait to see where we go from here.